Greetings, book lovers, and welcome to Author-ized. We are delighted to welcome a writer whose book, The Prize, is changing the national conversation about education in America. Dale Russakoff is a veteran reporter who spent 28 years at the Washington Post covering presidential campaigns, education, the economy, and other breaking topics. Her profiles include Washington Post magazine cover stories on Bill Bradley and Condoleezza Rice, and a New Yorker profile of New York City's welfare commissioner, Nicholas Scoppetta. The Prize, Who's in Charge of America's Schools, her first book, was serialized in the New Yorker. Russakoff, a longtime volunteer tutor in the Newark, New Jersey schools, lives in Montclair with her family. Welcome to Author-ized, Dale Russakoff.
Thank you so much.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Dale, and your very prestigious career as a journalist.
Well, I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and I went to public schools there, and I actually grew up in the last decade of legal segregation in Birmingham. So I experienced a lot of the upheavals of the civil rights movement and coming to terms with racism in the South. And I think that really that experience has a lot to do with me writing this book, because the whole backdrop of racism and inequality that was just so much a part of my daily life, even before I realized that that was a big issue in the world, has just been part of the way I think about things all my life, through school, through journalism, through just relating to the communities I live in. And so that really did lead me to be interested in exploring what was going on in Newark. I was a reporter at two different smaller papers before I came to the Washington Post, and then I was in the Post's, I was in Washington for about 14 years, and then in New York City for 14 years for the Post. And in the New York Bureau, I became really fascinated by Newark, New Jersey. It was part of the area we covered, and it seemed to me such a metaphor for inner cities in America that had once been great cities and had been drained by all the forces of the second half of the 20th century, the suburbanization and white flight, urban renewal, and just deindustrialization in general. And trying to sort of look at Newark and understand what comes next after that had just drawn me back and back to Newark to do stories. And when this announcement came, the day that, I saw a story in the Star Ledger saying that Mark Zuckerberg was giving this gift, and it kind of fit with something an approach I had started to really take with a lot of stories at the Washington Post, was when given that the Post covered so much about politics and legislation, whenever there was kind of a big idea that took root in Washington, I would always try to find a way to trace it back to its origins, to see where did this come from, and then to follow it to its intended beneficiaries. Does it actually reach the people it's supposed to help? And try to look at all of the human elements and all of the forces that get unleashed along the way of something like this. And so this just became almost a continuation of that kind of approach that I had always liked to take when I covered Washington.
So were you a journalism major in college and knew that journalism would be the path you would take?
No, I wasn't. I was a history and lit major. And I started doing college journalism. I went to Harvard and was working for the Harvard Crimson, as just a student reporter on the paper. And what I loved about this major, history and lit, was that you were always looking at ways to see the literature of a period as a window onto the history of the period. And I started to see journalism as a way to do that. Like you could really write articles that could give you a sense of what does this time and place mean in history, and look for that. I mean, not that you could always achieve it, but to be looking for that, like looking at this as a story of our times, whatever you're writing. So that kind of, I think, led me to be a journalist.
In writing The Prize, you've said there's really no hero in this. Are there bad guys and good guys? Tell us a little bit about the story.
Yeah, well, the thing about the writing of the book that was so interesting and challenging was that everybody had good intentions. I mean, really good intentions. Mark Zuckerberg had the purest of intentions. Cory Booker and Chris Christie had very political motivations, but also I think they were very sincere in their belief that what they were doing was going to make a huge difference in education in the biggest and poorest city. Well, second poorest. I think Camden is poorer than New York. I think that the fact was, though, that they didn't know the city, and they didn't, even though Booker was the mayor, I don't think he really knew or acted on the kind of knowledge you need to have of what it's like to be a child in this school district, what it's like to be a family raising a child in this school district, what it's like to teach in it. All of those things got so complicated and sometimes in very, difficult ways by this idea that they had where they were just going to come in from the outside and change everything about the way children in New York were educated. And so I saw the heroes of the book as the teachers in the school district who had for years, many of them for really long periods of time, been committed to teaching the toughest to teach kids and understanding that this isn't something that you're going to turn around in 5 years, and they're going to commit their lives to it, and they understand that it's something that is always a challenge. And I was so taken with that mentality, what kind of person it takes to do that so well. So there is a teacher in the book who when I say there are no heroes and no villains in this book, but there is a heroine, I think of her, and her name is Princess Williams, and she's now married. It's now Princess Fils-Ami. And she was born and raised in Newark. She grew up in really challenging circumstances, much like many of the students that she has in her classes. And she came back to Newark. She was a very gifted student and had some opportunities that she took great advantage of, and so she ended up going to NYU, and she became a teacher with the single goal of coming back to Newark and being there for the kids who, like her, need somebody to help them, rise out of this adversity. And watching her teach, watching the way that the kids in her class just felt so safe in her classroom. And it's not just physically safe, they just seemed to feel like they were being embraced. And they said things and did things all the time that made you realize that without anyone having told them, they knew she was like them. They knew something that they had in common with her. And I saw some really, really gifted teachers who weren't from Newark, but there's something so special and irreplaceable about a gifted teacher who's from the same place as the students that she's teaching or he's teaching. And she was just a really towering example.
She sounds wonderful. We should all be so lucky to have that kind of teacher in our lives,
Absolutely.
right? We wish that for all children.
Absolutely.
So who are some of your favorite writers? What's on your bedstand now?
Let's see, I recently reread Alex Kobowitz's book, There Are No Children Here, about these two brothers growing up in a really devastatingly difficult housing project in Chicago. I read that when it came out, I would say over 15 years ago, I'm not sure how long ago. And I reread it because he reviewed my book and gave it such a, generous, wonderful review. And I just remembered how much his book had inspired me, so I went back and reread it. And it is probably the best book I can imagine about poverty in America, because he doesn't ever write with any of a sense of pity at all. It's more just like the story of these boys and their daily lives, and it's just so intensely true to their experience. So I was really, really taken with that. And I'm actually reading the Elena Ferrante series now, and much like everyone in America.
It's such a commitment.
It is, yeah. But I'm loving it. I think she's an amazing writer. And I feel as if that friendship between those two women has made me think of every female friendship I've had in my life. So I'm really, really loving that.
So who's your favorite fictional character?
Well, that's easy for me. in a funny way. It's Quentin Compson in The Sound and the Fury and Absalom, Absalom. I became an incredible follower of Faulkner when I was in college. I never had been exposed to Faulkner growing up in Alabama. But when I read him in college, I just felt as if, you know, he was speaking to me about the experience of growing up in the South and feeling ambivalent towards the South, loving it and hating it at the same time, and then leaving and feeling so displaced outside. And the character Quentin Compson in The Sound and the Fury and in Absalom, Absalom is just the embodiment of that. And I found out when I was in college that there was somebody had put a plaque in his memory on the he was in the Sound and the Fury. He commits suicide and he jumps off a bridge that's at Harvard over the Charles River, and somebody just presumed it was this particular bridge at this particular spot, and you know, had put this plaque there. And so somebody told my English class about it, and I had a number of friends who were also from the South who also got really attached to the Quentin Compson character and to Faulkner, and we used to go to the plaque together all the time. So I think that there's never been another character like that for me in fiction.
Are you working on anything now?
You know, I am looking into a number of things. I want to keep writing about education. I had never covered education as an assignment for the Washington Post, even though I always tried to find ways to write about education as part of whatever else I was writing about. And having a chance to write this whole book has made me feel just, you know, like this is what I want to focus on. So I'm interested in education and education philanthropy, in this movement that seems to be gathering some steam in the country to create more and more community schools that have services for kids and adults that basically address the issues of a neighborhood as well as the issues of the kids in the classroom.
I read in your biography you do some tutoring in Newark.
Well, I did tutor in Newark, and I also tutored in Montclair, New Jersey, where we live. And I've always loved to do that. I've been doing that for years.
What age group? What did you do?
Well, I've done basically elementary school and middle school, and writing. I love to tutor kids in writing, and I work. There's a volunteer project in my town where people who have a writing background help the kids who are from low-income backgrounds write their college essays, and just sort of, you know, provide them with that kind of sounding board and advisor to write the stories they have to tell.
Oh, that is so fabulous.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell our viewers about your writing or your book or anything that you'd like them to know?
Sure. I was writing this book there was a lot of serendipity involved in it for me. I just, you know, as I said, I'd always been interested in education. I'd always been interested in Newark. And I happened to see an article in the Star Ledger on a Thursday, I think, saying that the next day this gift was going to be announced on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and that Mark Zuckerberg was giving $100 million to the New York schools. And I just, you know, read that and thought, that's so interesting, I just want to watch that. And I had never seen the Oprah Show. And I'm probably the only person in America who had, but I turned it on and I watched it, and I was just absolutely transfixed. You know, this idea that this young guy who's, you know, about the age of my children and already has billions of dollars is going to give $100 million to the Newark schools, and that Cory Booker and Chris Christie, both of whom I knew from having covered New Jersey, were going to use it to turn, you know, to try to turn Newark around. And it was just about everything I was interested in. And the odd thing was that at the time I was recovering from cancer. I had been diagnosed with esophageal cancer about a year before, and was very lucky that I turned out to have a treatable form of it, and I had great care from, you know, my doctors. And I was having trouble though because it's major surgery, and I had radiation and chemo, and it was almost I guess a year after the surgery, and I still was not really feeling like myself. But my husband really urged me to take this on because, you know, it was something I wanted so much to do. And as I started working on it, I realized that I was completely recovering, that it was something about being able to write and report and engage in something I cared so much about as a journalist again. And I had taken a buyout from the Washington Post, so I didn't have my daily newspaper job anymore. So, you know, I was recovering, and I was recovering from having lost my job anyway. And just to have this to do, it was really like over the next few weeks, I suddenly realized, well, this is what I needed to recover. And so it was really, I mean, it meant a lot to me on a lot of levels to be able to write this book.
Serendipity, indeed.
Yes.
So now we do something a little bit different, Dale. At the end of every Author-ized, we ask our authors to pick up their book, open to any page, serendipitously, and read a couple of sentences and talk about that part of the book. So,
oh, really just open it. Don't go looking for something. You just...
if you can, I mean, if it's the table of contents, obviously, but we call it Author-ized One-liners. So yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just going to do
Okay.
it by chance.
Dig in.
Let's see where we are here. I'm going to skip a little bit. Oh, well, I just opened to a page from Princess Williams's class.
Oh,
so,
excellent.
So this is a great great choice. This was the day of kindergarten graduation. So it was, her class was graduating after a year of being her students. Let's see, it was June 22nd, 2012. 19 of Williams's 23 students were marching, 4 were being held back. The graduates arrived early in their Sunday best. Girls wore flower print dresses, white dress socks with ribbons threaded through them, and braids adorned with multicolored barrettes and beads that matched their dresses. Boys wore dress pants and dress shirts. Williams wore a tailored black and white dress and heels. The students were eager to share what they would remember about their teacher. Jonathan. I'll remember how nice she is to us and how she always wears a nice dress. Faith. Miss Williams is special to us because she's a great teacher and she always has a smile on her face. Larry. She has taught things we didn't know. She taught us to read a book and to write. Jonathan asked to add one more thought. My favorite memory is I learned how to read. So that, I'm so glad I opened to that page. I actually was thinking, oh, I'd actually like to read the last paragraph too. Could I do that?
Of course.
Okay, maybe you want to sub it out or something. This is when Princess Williams is calling all of her students up to the podium and they're getting their little diplomas. And she calls them all one at a time. And she had decided, she was trying to think, what could she say to them that would be something they might remember when they grow up, or just something that would stay with them all their lives. And she decided that what she would do is each one came up, she would say what she thought this child was going to be when he or she grew up, and what she saw in them and what she hoped for them. So there was this one little boy in the class who is part of the story who had started off very disruptive and not wanting to pay attention or to do what she said, and she had spent so much time trying to get him to cooperate and not just sitting him down but actually talking to him and listening to him and discovering that he was a very bright little boy. And so he had become very attached to her. So his name is Tariq Anderson. So after she's gone through all these other kids, it says last in line was Tariq, the gifted boy who always underestimated himself. She had thought hard about what to say to Tariq to bolster his confidence for the long haul. This scholar says he wants to be a policeman, but the truth is that Tariq is a future genius. He's so brilliant and he tries to hide it, Williams said as the small boy crossed the stage, eyes fixed on his teacher. Extending his diploma with a flourish, she said with all her heart, "Show your brilliance, Tariq Anderson." And that just, when that happened, I was so moved because I really felt it kind of embodied what she was able to do with these kids. And not just what she had done with him during that school year, but the way she had stayed up, sleepless, that night, just remembering, just thinking about what she could say, and what she said to him in particular was very special.
It's beautiful. I'm very moved right now. So thank you Dale Russakoff for
Thank you
joining
so
us
much,
at
Irene.
Author-ized. And everybody go read this book. It is an amazing book. Check back soon for more inspiring writers talking about their inspiring books. Thank you.